Hello there, dear viewer. In this video I'm going to be talking about some great films released by Radiance Films. In particular, I'm going to cover all of their releases from this year so far, from January to March, talk about each title, and then pick out my favourites, my top recommendations of the bunch. If you're new here or you haven't heard of Radiance before, they are a great Blu-ray label focusing on films from all around the world, bringing great films to physical media, often for the first time worldwide. And some of these are from fantastic filmmakers, big names in their own genres and their own countries, but perhaps some of the lesser known films in their catalogues. And I am continually surprised by all of the great things that they release that I had never heard about before they bring those to the market. So if you're a fan of films from all around the world, it's definitely worth paying attention. And if you like other Blu-ray labels like the Criterion Collection and Arrow Video, Indicator, etc., then it's definitely worth having a listen and seeing if any of these titles sound like they could be a good match for you. I think this one is a great starting place. Hardboiled, 3 pulp thrillers by French director Alain Corneau. As the title would suggest, this is a collection of French movies from the 1970s, all concerning, pulpy stories. These are really engaging thrillers with some of the best French actors featuring in these films. You have the likes of Yves Montand, Simone Signoret, Catherine Deneuve, Gérard Depardieu. Some great performances in these films. The 3 films that you get are Police Python 357, Série Noire, and Le Choix des Armes. And each one of these I greatly enjoyed, although my favourite of the bunch would be Série Noire. I'd recommend this set to anyone that likes crime fiction, especially if you like French cinema. You can see the influences of the works of Jean-Pierre Melville, so the great films like Le Cercle Rouge are in some of these films. You can also see the influence of American crime cinema of the early 1970s, such as The French Connection and the films made by Don Siegel and Clint Eastwood, like the Dirty Harry films. And if you have a fondness for the Italian poliziotteschi movies, then this could be something to explore as well, because it's dealing with similar kind of stories, subject matter, although there is a certain French quality to these films. As always, Radiance do a fantastic box set. This time they've put the 3 films in one case, which makes this a lot thinner than some of the other box sets that I have on the back shelf here. And I think this is actually a great touch because it saves on shelf space. It's in this rigid hard case here, which looks excellent. You've got the titles of the films on the back. Inside the case there is this really nice book which has an interview with the filmmaker himself. There is a piece of writing from him, a tribute in here, and then there's some brand new pieces which have been written for this release. So it's a cracking box set, highly recommended from me, and I think it's available in the US as well as the UK, so hopefully you can get your hands on this no matter where you are. Then something I was extremely excited for when it first got announced. This is the film The Eel from Japanese director Shohei Imamura. This won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, and this has long been missing on Blu-ray. A few years ago I made it sort of a mini project for me to try and watch as many Cannes Palme d'Or winners, and I sourced all of the Blu-ray copies of the films that I could get, and this is one that has been missing up until now. The film stars Koji Yakusho, who people will know from Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure, or much more recently, Wim Wenders' Perfect Days, which is a beautiful film. Absolutely love that one. Here he plays a man who catches his wife in the act, cheating on him in their bedroom, and so he just sees red and murders them both. And it is this horrific, quite extreme depiction of violence to kick off this film. We see him turn himself in, and then he goes to prison, but when we see him get released on parole, this is where the story starts. And it's him, looking for a new start in life, also reflecting on what he did. And he gets this job working at a barber shop, and things seem to be going quite well, but he meets this young woman who had attempted to take her own life, and she survived that, but he has this fascination around her and this act, and it starts to dredge up a lot of darkness from his old past, which he just can't escape from. It's quite an interesting film tonally because it begins with this extreme graphic act of violence, and that would kind of set the tone for the rest of the film. You might think there's going to be more of that, but really what comes after is much more mellow and calm and reflective. So I would say to you, if you are perhaps put off by that kind of violence in the film, don't be, because that is merely just setting up the story. That is not necessarily what the film is even about. And I think it's an incredibly powerful film, something that all of us will find something to connect to in here, because it's about, guilt and regret and trying to start anew, and the difficulties of how things can be brought back into one's life when you're trying to escape it. So a very deep film, and one that I'm so glad has finally had an excellent release. There's also a few really great features on here. There's one with Tony Raines, who is an expert in Asian cinema, and also another expert in Japanese cinema, Tom Mess, is on here as well. There's also two versions of the film on here. There is the director's cut and the theatrical cut. This is a region A and B release as well, so I think this is available in the US, so this is an excellent one. If you're a fan of Japanese cinema, Shohei Imamura is one of the giants of the past few decades, and his films are definitely worth seeking out. Another fantastic film here. This is the French film Je t'aime from director Alain Resnais. This is a science fiction film, which might sound, impractical or not likely from a filmmaker like Alain Resnais, but he's using this genre, this device in the film, to tell a story that is very much something that he is concerned with in the rest of his filmography. If you're not familiar with Resnais, he made some fantastic films like Last Year at Marienbad and Hiroshima, Mon Amour, and there's a whole series of other great films that he made. He was part of the French New Wave movement, but his films are very different to the likes of Jean-Luc Godard or Francois Truffaut. And even though this film isn't his most famous film, I think this is certainly one of his best works. Here we follow this man who, after a failed attempt on his own life, he is approached by these scientists to become the first subject to travel back in time in their time machine. I know it doesn't quite sound like an Alain Resnais film, but this is used as a way of us looking into the history of this man and finding out how he got to the place he was in at the start of the film. And through the use of this device, the story is told through these fragments, these flashbacks, and each time the time machine is used, we kind of get more pieces of this jigsaw puzzle to put together to build an idea of what happened to this man. It's a film that has such a great editing style, and it greatly reminded me of the old film experiment, the Kuleshov effect, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's an experiment where you see this image of a man with just a stony-faced, expressionless face, but the image of this man's face is juxtaposed with different images. So there's one of a coffin, there's one of some food, and there's one of a lady. And each one of these, when put next to the man's face, we look at the image of the man's face in a different way. And I see this in Je t'aime, because as we begin to see more of the fragments of this man's life with his love interest and, where he's been in his life, we see things in a different way. That's a very poor way of me saying this is an excellent film, and I highly recommend it. Radiance have done a great job, as always, with their release. There are a bunch of interviews here with the actors. There's one with the director himself. There's a documentary on Alain Resnais as well. And the film looks great from the 2K restoration that is on the disc. The disc is also a region-free release as well. So this is fantastic. I absolutely loved this one. Then going back into February, we have two films from Patrick Tam, Nomad and My Heart Is That Eternal Rose. Patrick Tam is a key figure in the new wave of Hong Kong cinema. He was a mentor to Wong Kar-wai. He worked with many collaborators that worked on key films in Hong Kong cinema from that period. Some of them you see on these films, like Christopher Doyle who is the cinematographer who worked a lot with Wong Kar-wai. He's in this set. And this is another example of me being introduced to some fantastic films from Radiance. Nomad follows these 4 young people who are, having the time of their lives in some sense. They're enjoying their youth. But there is the arrival of this Red Army deserter who breaks this idea of this utopian vision of how one can live life. In many ways, it makes me think of how often we can be having a great time in life and then some outsider, whether it's a person or just some event, some force, can completely shatter that normality that we felt. And sometimes that is a political force, like in this film. And there are some politics here that I probably don't quite understand, and I need to kind of read up on. But it's a very shocking film. It made me think a lot about what I just said, and how the nature of life is that things can be going very well, and then something just comes and just completely changes things. Similarly, My Heart Is That Eternal Rose has a lot of the same kind of themes that are in Nomad. We see these 2 lovers who are split up at the start after this violent act, and the guy played by Tony Leung, he goes away to be a kind of contract killer in the Philippines, and then when he's reunited with his love, she's involved with this criminal gang, and there's a lot of kind of conflict that arises from that. This one is much more in the kind of heroic bloodshed vein that was very popular in Hong Kong cinema at the time. But these are beautiful films, definitely worth exploring if you want to go deeper into Hong Kong cinema, particularly if you like the films of Wong Kar-wai. Then Patrick Tam's films are definitely worth looking into. The release from Radiance is great. In the special features, you've got Tony Raines once again. You've got one of my favourite people, Frank Jeng, doing an audio commentary. So this is absolutely excellent. This is a Region B release, so I think it's only available in the UK, but highly recommended from me. Next we have What Happened Was. This is a film directed by Tom Noonan, starring himself, adapted from his own stage play, about these 2 co-workers who spend an evening together, and at first things are very awkward. These 2 people do not seem like a good match romantically, or even in terms of friendship, they don't seem like they would gel. He's very kind of awkward, but he is confident in his own ability, his intelligence, and really what I see in this film is 2 different people who are alone and they're searching for a connection. And as you're watching this film, you kind of just wish that they would be able to connect. And that's what the film is. That's the tension in this film. Now, it's adapted from the stage play, and it is all set in this one apartment. Some people might find that uncinematic, but it is a great film visually still. And the way it is told, I think it's directed very well. How this story and relationship unfolds across the course of the film really is sort of heartbreaking at points. So this was another real discovery for me. I need to revisit this one. It's not instantly a favourite of mine, but very powerful and definitely affected me. You've got some great special features. You've got the director Tom Noonan being interviewed on here. And this is a 4K restoration. The Blu-ray is region free. So this is one that is definitely worth checking out. Although, like I said, if you're not a fan of these films that are set in one location and very much feel like they are adapted from a play, it might not be for you, but certainly one that I enjoyed. Next we have Hokuriku Proxy War from Japanese director Kinji Fukasaku. That is a name who will be known to a lot of Blu-ray collectors because over the past 5 years or so, he has had such a resurgence on physical media. So many of his films have come to Blu-ray from labels like Radiance, Arrow, Eureka, etc. This was Fukasaku's last Yakuza movie based on real-life events. And in fact, I think the reason he stopped making Yakuza movies was the release of this film actually impacted real-life events. I think some people got killed similarly to how events are in this film or something like that. I can't quite remember. But if you like a Yakuza movie, then you know what you're going to get with this film. And I think when I watched this, I'd recently watched a ton of other Yakuza movies and gangster movies. So I think I'm kind of at that point where I'm a bit fatigued with some of these films, which is not to say that the films are bad. It's just like with film noir, when I watch so many of them in recent memory, they kind of blur into one, or they don't hit me as hard as they would if I was watching it in a vacuum. So that's not to diminish the film at all. It's as good as Fukasaku's other movies in the similar vein. It just didn't hit me all that hard. But I'm going to now, I think, have a bit of a detox on these Yakuza movies like I did with film noir, and I will revisit this film at some point in the future. This is the first release of this film in the world on Blu-ray, based off a 4K restoration, and it does look beautiful. With some great special features, there's one that goes into the real life case surrounding this film. So another great release from Radiance, and particularly if you're into these Japanese crime films, one to seek out. Next was a real discovery for me. This is The Cat from German director Dominik Graf. This is a bank heist movie about these robbers that go into this bank, and the police that surround the bank, they have difficulty in resolving the situation because the robbers in the bank have someone on the outside who is watching from another building. He's seeing all of the police operations outside, and he's informing the robbers on the inside. So this is great heist stuff. Seeing the confidence of this guy, the cat, on the outside, and just seeing this all unfold. You really don't know where it's going to go, how things are going to resolve. And I had a great time with this one. A real surprise from me, because before Radiance announced this, I'd never even heard of this film. Obviously, I highly recommend this to anyone who likes a good heist thriller. There are some good special features on here as well with the filmmakers. So another all-around brilliant release. Next, we have another two-film set from Radiance. This is Il Posto and I Fidanzati from Umano Olmi, a great filmmaker who I'd never seen these two films before, and I'd heard so many people talk about Il Posto, and this is the first time they're getting a Blu-ray release in the entire world. So I stubbornly held out on watching the film on DVDs and streaming, etc. for a great Blu-ray, and I'm so glad that I did. Il Posto is all about this young man getting his first job in a big company, and over the course of the film we see him become disenfranchised by the way things work in business and in a world of capitalism, and the way other people are so embedded in these systems. There's a very iconic scene, or iconic to me, where he gets given a position at this desk in this room, and there are these people that are much older than him, you know, middle-aged people. When they see he's been given a desk that is closer to the boss at the front of the room, they then kick up a fuss, because to them the position of being one desk closer to the front is a big deal to them. And it's so eye-opening, because all of us will recognize this in real life. The way people act at work, and the kind of vying for these things that don't really mean anything. The importance people place on these positions in work is kind of a bit crazy. And this is stuff that's not even necessarily linked to money and making a better life for yourself. It's often just stuff about status and the importance that we place on our own status in society, and how the lack of the status that we want can actually make us greatly unhappy. And the film is eye-opening, because this young man, he realizes this is what life is. You're stuck as a cog in the machine, and it's kind of a bit depressing in that way. And then the second film in this set, it looks at similar subject matter about this young man leaving his fiancée to go and get this work, and some of the regret around that, and is it the right decision? But in fact, sometimes you feel forced to make these kind of choices in life. On the Obi strip here, it references Antonioni and the famous isolation that is shown in his film of these people in these landscapes of buildings and concrete, and how really as humans we're not built for this kind of life. We haven't evolved to be in a society like we are, and really biologically we are the same as people that were doing cave paintings thousands and thousands of years ago. we just aren't equipped to often deal with some of the nuances of, corporate life and work and separation from people that we love. So yeah, two fantastic films. They really are great films. I connected very deeply to these, and so glad I waited to see these because the 4K restorations on these Blu-ray discs are excellent. Of course, you have a ton of great special features here going into the films themselves, and this is a region-free set, so I think this is available in the US as well as the UK. Then we come to Underworld Beauty from Japanese director Seijun Suzuki. This is one of his crime gangster stories from the 1950s, so this is one of his more earlier works, and in many ways you kind of see where he would go on in his later works, his masterpieces, but here it hasn't quite crystallized yet. You see a filmmaker exploring these ideas, but maybe not being able to carry them out to the highest efficiency. I talked a bit before when I was talking about the Fukusaku movie about my fatigue with these Japanese gangster movies, and perhaps this has just caught me in a bad time as well. I just did not like it as much as some of Suzuki's other movies. That said, I really appreciate Radiance bringing this to the market because it fills in a gap in the filmography of Suzuki, and I'm glad that I've seen this now because I've seen where he started off. Sometimes you feel like filmmakers begin at the height of their powers when often the case is they really put in the work, the 10,000 hours to get to the point where they are making their masterpieces. So Underworld Beauty, one that I will revisit at some point in the future. But really when I was watching this, it just made me want to go and watch Branded to Kill or Tokyo Drifter, etc. And then we come to a film, another genuine surprise for me. It is Weak Spot from director Peter Fleischmann. The film has a great premise because we follow this man played by Ugo Tognazzi, who is seen to be part of this secret underground group, and he is approached by these special agents and kept captive by them because they need to transport him for interrogation. And we watch it from the view of this man, and he is a wrong man. He has been wrongly thought of as someone who he isn't. But we go along for the story, and it's really about seeing the interactions between this man and his captive. Captive is the wrong word, but by this special agent who has arrested him, played by Michel Piccoli, in a fantastic performance. Seeing these two men who are very different but actually have a lot of similarities as well, and both men uncover different things about each other just through their conversations. It's a beautiful film to look at because of the locations. It's a road movie of sorts. It's a great film about these two guys, like I said, learning more about themselves and one another. And it always keeps you second guessing because you never really know the true nature of who these people are. It's fantastic stuff and looks great on the 4K restoration on Radiance's Blu-ray. Tons of great special features as always as well. So I absolutely loved this one. So having talked about each one of these releases now, I have to try and pick some favourites, and this is really difficult because I know I've talked a lot about Radiance in the past. They really are doing the best work in the entire Blu-ray industry in terms of the films that they bring to the market, but also the way that they package the films and the extra features and the booklets that are in the limited editions. And, I discover so many new films through Radiance's catalogue that I have so many memorable experiences watching these films for the first time. So it's hard to pick some favourites, but let's try. Certainly the two Ermanno Olmi films, Il Posto and I Fidanzati, that is an excellent release, and you're getting great value because you're getting two fantastic films restored in 4K that have been missing on Blu-ray for the longest time. Equally, the two Patrick Tam films are so great as well, so I would highly recommend that. I also loved The Cat, as I said, a great heist film, and to finally get The Eel on Blu-ray is another one that I've ticked off my Palm Door list. Honestly, you can't go wrong with any one of these releases, so just have a look, see which ones are to your own tastes, and I think you will be pleased no matter what you go with here. If you'd like more reviews and recommendations from me, just click the video that's on screen right now. Until next time, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.